Well, hello everybody. Welcome to ZTV Live. Today's Tuesday, April 6th, and it's opening day at Nats Park finally. So that's something to celebrate today for sure. Tonight is Reading, Writing, and Ralph, but before we get to Ralph Peluso, I just wanted to let everybody know that our April edition is on newsstands right now. Wonderful cover article and cover story, cover photograph, I should say, and cover story. It's full of great articles, and spring is blooming all around Alexandria, so I urge you to go ahead and pick a copy up as soon as you can. And I am pleased to welcome Mr. Ralph Peluso, our literary editor on Reading, Writing, and Ralph. Hey, Ralph.
Hi, Susan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing excellent. How are you?
I'm doing great. Spring is in the air. The golf balls are flying. Baseballs are flying.
Yay!
People are out. I mean, it's just great. Hopefully, we'll be back to normal here soon.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think everybody's ready for that.
Yeah. And we have another exciting guest on tonight, Irene Wittig, who's written a very touching, gripping tale of the World War II-era Austria. And I think most people will enjoy it. It's very good, very character intense, and I'd like to bring her on. But before we do that, I'd like the audience to see a trailer of the book.
Three friends in a city they love. Then the Nazis came. Emma is safe. Her friends are not. What would you do?
Hi, Irene. How are you?
Very well, thank you. It's great to be here.
Welcome. Great. Welcome to the show. And I was saying just before you got on, it was a very gripping tale, World War II-era Austria, and learned a lot I didn't know because we weren't told in the history books. But before we get into the book, I'd like for you to tell our viewers about yourself. You have a very exciting background. You've done a lot of things and lived in several exciting places. So tell the audience.
Well, I was born in Rome because my mother, who was Viennese and half Jewish, found safety in Italy. She was a dancer and worked with a company there. And so I was born in Rome. And later we emigrated to Argentina, to Buenos Aires, and from Buenos Aires then to New York. And I grew up in a neighborhood on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, which was filled with people like us, people displaced by war, many Holocaust survivors. And so between that and in Rome and in Argentina, I grew up with World War II as sort of a constant presence. And plus my uncle, who you can see in the picture behind me, that sketch, he was a Ritchie boy who been emigrated from Austria, and then that's him, and then served in the American Army as a Ritchie boy, meaning trained at Fort Ritchie, at Camp Ritchie, Fort Ritchie, to be an interrogator and do intelligence because of being able to speak both German and French.
And now you've lived in some places like Naples, for one.
Yes, I mean,
How'd you like Naples? Being Italian, my family's from Naples. How'd you like Naples?
I love it's probably my favorite place at the moment, especially. I would love to be there. Naples is a unique place. Besides lots of history, it's not really overrun by tourists. It really is a city that belongs to the Neapolitans, and So in that sense, unlike Florence, which is overrun by tourists, especially nowadays, well, maybe not this year, but Naples is a great place to visit. And from Naples, of course, you can go to Capri and Sorrento and Ischia and Pompeii and all that. So it's a wonderful place. I lived there.
Make the audience jealous now. Make the
Yes,
audience jealous. Tell them where you got married.
on Capri, on the Isle of
Uh,
Capri. So the
Beautiful
first story
place.
by the mayor. Yeah, it was great. And then my
It-
husband and I lived in Geneva for well, we lived right outside Geneva for 6 years, many years later, which was
yeah,
also great.
yeah,
And
Geneva's a
beautiful.
beautiful place as well,
Yeah,
and
beautiful.
Vienna's a beautiful place. So, where, when did you decide to take on this topic, and what was the inspiration for the book?
This started, well, the inspiration for the book really is my family's history and all the stories that I heard from all the people that I knew growing up. And the fact that all these experiences linger with you so long, and that's where the title comes from. But I actually began this book about 30 years ago. And then in a different, it was quite different then. And then when I came back to it, I changed the whole second half of the book and could imagine what it would have to have been somebody who stayed in Vienna, whereas my family was able to get out. So that's basically the inspiration. Um, and to sort of study the different ways people reacted. I think the characters in the book sort of show all sides. Those um, who had to leave, those who stayed because they were believers in the Nazi system, and those like the main character Emma, who was unable to leave um, and felt betrayed by her country. And then there are other characters who sort of in between, go the ones who go along even if they don't believe. So I tried to cover all the different ways people react to to authoritarian regimes.
It's, you know, what we're seeing now with writers is a great many more stories in the World War II era, but not like we saw in the 50s and 60s in the books that came out and the movies that came out. We're seeing stuff with much different storylines, much more depth to the characters, and stuff that we hadn't seen or heard of before. You know, usually the stories are written from a French perspective or a German perspective. Now we're seeing Polish, Hungarian, Czechoslovakian, Italian, and Austrian. What do you think has driven this change, where we're seeing much broader storylines than we ever saw before?
I think there are different things. I think historically things have come out where Europe couldn't hide from the truth of what actually happened. So it's not just Austria, but before it was Switzerland was uninvolved, Sweden was neutral. The French, of course, always viewed themselves as having resisted. Um, and none of that is absolutely true. So there was a lot of collaboration in France, and there's a very good series on MHC network, which I think was PBS before, called The French Village, which talks exactly about that. What was it like in France in an occupied town? And all the different levels of the people who collaborated, the people who resisted, the ones who went along. So it wasn't black and white. It wasn't the good guys and the bad guys. There were a lot of in between guys. Some of them switched places. And with Austria specifically, um, there was something which I cover in the book called the Moscow Declaration of 1943, where the Allies decided that for purposes that would serve the Allies, that Austria should be considered the first of Hitler's victims. But the declaration also said that they would be responsible for their misdeeds during that regime. But it was sort of interpreted afterwards that they were the first victims and the misdeeds were not talked about until they had to, and that really didn't come till the Waldheim scandal in the 90s. And now there's been a real recognition of that. Plus, I think the other big factor is that there's now a third generation that is removed from it, who is interested in it, who is willing to research it, who can look at it in a less emotional way so that they're not defensive. Whereas the first generation, of course, had to defend whatever they did. They were the bad guys. The second generation was embarrassed, didn't want to talk about it, or felt sorry for their parents, didn't want them to be blamed. So they also kept quiet. I think the third generation is willing to look at it. I think that's opened up a lot of doors.
Yeah, I think that's a good perspective. Yeah. Yeah, I think the inquisitiveness of the third generation may have a lot to do with it too.
And of course,
and the internet. That's a good point.
You can find out a lot.
You can. Now, I'm gonna give the audience the first trivia question here. So we're gonna have 3 questions tonight. The first person with the correct answer for each wins an autographed copy of Irene's book. If we get a duplicate winner, then we take second place. And the first question is, one of the most famous dishes in Austria is Wiener Schnitzel. You take the veal, you pound it down, make it thin, put egg on it, breadcrumbs, fry it. The question, though, is in what city was Wiener Schnitzel first created? And so we'll take the first correct answer will win a copy of the book. I'd like you to spend some time with the pictures you have with your family and the old pictures and some of the shots of Austria and talk through those.
Okay.
And I think the first one that comes up is a family photo. There we go.
Yeah, this is a picture of my mother in the middle, her brother, and her mother. And I think it really captures them. But also the fact that it's colorized in that way, I think makes it quite charming. So this would have been in
1937. Wow. It captures the era, that's for sure.
Yeah, because my mother left for Italy in 1937, and then Hitler came in 1938. And that's my grandmother, and she's somewhat the person I thought of when I was writing the main character of Emma. I could imagine my grandmother, who was not Jewish, being the Emma character.
All right.
And this is my grandfather, who owned a very elegant store in the downtown area of Vienna, and he was in Switzerland when Hitler came, asked for asylum. They didn't grant it to him, so he snuck into France, and he spoke French fluently, so he could sort of hide. But he was arrested at one point and was imprisoned for a year, and managed to escape with the help of somebody, and then was hidden by a friend in Nice to the end of the war, and then spent the rest of his life in Paris. never went back to Vienna. And this I happened to find on the internet, which is incredible. This was a poster done for my grandfather's store in 1920 by an artist named Hans Neumann, and it's now in a museum in Vienna. And I don't think my mother ever knew about this because she would have just been 3 years old when this was done. And this is one of several works by an artist named Bela Husserl, who was the uncle of a childhood friend of mine who also grew up in New York in this Viennese diaspora neighborhood. And sadly, he was one of the euthanasia victims, one of the Nazis' euthanasia victims. Mm. And this is my mother's cousin who was also a euthanasia victim. And her story is in the Holocaust Museum here in Washington.
Wow.
And this is Ungargasse, which is a street that is important in the novel. And the middle building is the house in which the main two of the characters live, and it's actually the house where my mother grew up. And so I know this building, which made it easy to describe. And this is my uncle who was the Ritchie boy and served. He was sent to France after the D-Day, and then fought in France, and then in Germany he interrogated the German prisoners of war, and did one propaganda broadcast which brought in a lot of surrenders.
Right.
And there is the Austrians have studied this now. There was an Austrian researcher who studied this, and I've been in touch with him about the Austrians who worked to defeat Nazism from this end.
So there's a fair amount of you and your family in the book and in the characters.
In the characters, not in the act, not in the plot per se,
not the plot,
except for what happened in Vienna before. Yeah. But yes, in the characters, yes.
Let's check in. Yeah, let's check in with Susan and see if we have a winner.
We do indeed have a winner. It's Michelle D'Amato, who came up with one of Milan, Italy, is actually where Wiener Schnitzel originated from. So congratulations, Michelle. Very good.
She's back.
She is back, and she I guess she also added Cotoletta Milanese, which may have been its original name.
She's precisely right.
A Milanese cutlet, I'm going to guess. So congratulations, Michelle. Nice to see you again.
So all that lingers, the title, there's a lot of subtext in there, and a lot of what goes on in the characters throughout the book, and the things that they never forget, fear, betrayal. So let's talk about the betrayals, because there's a lot of betrayals that go on in that book, and yet, Well,
I think the biggest betrayal is the country that betrayed its citizens. I mean, mm-hmm. I think the Jews who that my grandfather, let's say, that milieu that he belonged to, they felt Austrian. I mean, they were Austrians. They did not think of themselves as separate. And so for them, this was a terrible betrayal. And his brother, I mean, this is also interesting. My grandfather's brother stayed in stayed in Vienna during the war. And his wife was Catholic, he was Jewish. And he hid in a coal cellar for 3 years. And every night she would bring him food and take him for a quick walk. And then he would spend the day with 2 other men in the coal cellar. And I met him when I was a girl, and I went to Vienna. I looked up everybody that my mother had talked about. I was 17. And he and his wife were just wonderful people. But having lived very nicely before the war and then relegated to a 1-room apartment with toilet down the hall, in the later years. So,
Well, the other thing about betrayal was the in order to survive, you had to turn your friends in, and so many there's a lot of overtone and a lot of overt where people just turn people in to protect
yeah,
themselves.
yeah.
And how did I don't know if you ever talked to that about with your family? How did people feel about that?
Well,
Because that's the
so
ultimate
it
betrayal.
it didn't happen in my family because they were able to leave. So, but I think, as far as I know, nobody I know turned anybody in, and nobody I know was turned in. But I would not say that you turned in good friends. You know, you turned in neighbors. I think there are a lot of neighbors who were turned in. I'm not sure that good friend. I
Yeah,
don't know.
I
Actually,
don't know.
I
Um,
don't know that on a personal basis. Yeah,
but in the book, uh,
yeah, there were a couple. That's
there were a
right.
couple that got turned in, and they seemed like they were fairly good friends. Maybe not close, but
Yeah,
people that they knew more than just on a casual basis.
right.
So
Well, one was relative, right? One was
yeah,
relative by marriage. That's right. That's right. I
an
think
in-law,
that,
yeah.
yeah,
So it's pretty good, and
yeah.
and then the other things that lingered in the minds and hearts of the characters was when they lost somebody. That memory, although it fades, it never really goes away.
And I think, and I must say, this is something it took me years to really understand. Is that at the beginning, the losses that person is missing. You know, that person that you want to be there is not there. But what's really lost is what might have been. I mean, so I think that's the big loss. Is and for instance, with my mother's brother, who did not come back from the war, he at first it always seemed like he was missing because that was a big hole in our family. But later on, I thought how different things would have been had he lived. He would have had children. I would have had cousins. My mother would have been happier. My grandmother would have been happier. All these things, I think, you don't think of the full ramification of it, and especially it's hard to think of it for other people. I mean, but these are the things that linger. Not only that somebody is lost, but all that would have been possible because of that person is lost. The life that would
Yeah,
have been lost. And I think that's what really haunts,
yeah,
haunts you in
that's
the
an
book.
excellent point. That's an excellent point. And what I want to talk about after this is revenge, because there's a big element of revenge in the book. And that leads me to the second trivia question. And the question is, in what country or region did the term revenge is a dish best served cold come from? So, what area of the world, region, or country did the term revenge is a dish best served cold originate? So let's talk about revenge in the book. Um, there's a great satisfaction with revenge, and when it's done in a very blunt manner, it's probably most effective. So, what are you thoughts there?
Yeah, I think living well is the best revenge. So I tend to think revenge is, on the whole, not a good thing because it just leads to more revenge. And I think I do have something, I do say that in the book that if you avenge this, then that has to be avenged, and then that
Mm-hmm.
has to be avenged, and that creates a cycle that never ends. So there is some revenge, but uh, it's not carried out by the good people. It's not carried out by the good guys in this book. So at least I tried not to do it that way. Um, I think um, I think you want the bad guys punished. Okay? So you try to do that in a way where the good guys aren't tainted by the revenge. That's
But
at least what I.
you have an element of revenge at the end of that book that is done in such a manner, and we're not gonna give away the
Right.
ending, that it's blunt and there's no retort to it. So it was revenge
Because
that just finalizes
exactly
things.
right.
So there was no counter revenge. There couldn't be.
Right.
So it was. I thought that was a fun way to go about things. What are some of the reader takeaways that you would have? I know one of the things I took away from the book was, we weren't taught at all in history books as I originally would thought, right? I thought that Austria was neutral, and it turns out they weren't so neutral.
They
They
were
weren't.
never neutral. They weren't neutral at all. And also there was a big difference between Vienna and the rest of Austria. The rest of Austria was very much more conservative. They were much more willing to have the Nazis come in anyway. But Vienna greeted them with enormous enthusiasm. Right? And it was that, and they were real perpetrators in this war. I mean, some of the worst Nazis were Austrian, not German. And that Moscow Declaration made it possible to hide from that. That they were told that they could be seen as the first victim. They were also told that they have to take responsibility for what they did, and they sort of hid that part of it and just stuck with the story about being the first victim. And that took a long time to change. And I think now it finally has been recognized and accepted and acknowledged. And last year, they passed a law in Austria that the descendants of people who had to leave, who were persecuted, had to leave Austria, could regain the Austrian citizenship they would have had this not happened. And so I applied for that, basically in memory of my mother and my grandparents. And so I received Austrian citizenship this week on the 1st. And accompanying the citizenship papers were 3 letters, one from the ambassador, one from the mayor of Vienna, and one from the president. And basically what it said was, this is in light of the darkest period of their history, and that they consider those people like me who accepted the citizenship as showing trust in the Austrian Republic. And so they were grateful for that, for being given a second chance. That's really what it is. And so in
Well,
memory of
congratulations.
in memory of my mother and my grandparents and my uncle.
Yeah, congratulations. That's
Yeah,
uh, a good thing.
a good thing.
The other takeaway that I sensed was trust few in a crisis, particularly when your life depends on it. Right?
Well, I
Your
think
thoughts.
especially times like that when you're turning people in, yeah, I think that was a big factor. You really had to keep your eyes open. You didn't trust your neighbors. I think that's absolutely right. And I think you can find cases like that. You know, history repeats those kind of cases.
Yeah.
In where there've been other genocides, you keep your eyes and ears open, that you're not the one that's going to get caught.
Right.
Sadly,
You had 3 close friends that were significant in the book early on.
right?
Emma, Greta, and Leone. And Leone's fate it turned out wasn't good because she trusted somebody too much.
Right, that's right. That's right. And I also wanted with those three characters to show, first of all, that friendship was possible between a Jewish girl, a half Jewish girl, a Catholic girl, that they would have been friends, that distrust didn't always happen at that time, although anti-Semitism was quite strong even in Vienna. But I think there was definitely a mixing. Not everybody was separate, and I think that was the big shock to people like my grandparents and my mother, that things could change like that from one day to the next. Yeah.
Another takeaway is secrets never stay buried.
Right, that's true. Not just in these type of things, but I think that's true.
Everybody wants to tell the secret you told them to somebody else. So,
That's right.
and
That's
it
right.
just comes out. So very apparent. Talk about the relationship between Emma, Greta, and Leone in a little more detail. They were good friends. They got
They were good
together,
friends.
but then their lives intertwined, right?
Right.
Even after some of them
I
were gone.
also wanted to show was three different classes. Okay. So Greta was Emma was working class. Her father was a woodworker. Her mother was a laundress, and so she was working class. But because she was very beautiful, she worked in this elegant store because of Leone, whose parents owned the store. Leone's parents were well-to-do, refined, cultured people, and Leone was married to a doctor, so they were at that level. Whereas Greta, who came also from fairly ordinary circumstances, but went to university and met her husband there, and he came from a very wealthy family. So, and it's in that wealthy family where some of the bad guys were located. So, and so the three friends remained friends from childhood until the end. And I think that was a very feasible thing in Vienna at the time.
Yeah, that was pretty. Yeah, I've got one more relationship that I want to talk about, but I want to check with Susan and see if we have a winner on the second trivia question.
Okay.
We do not have a winner yet. So, viewers, please tap into your thinking caps. And the question is, in what country or region did the phrase "revenge is a dish best served cold" originate? It's quite an effective phrase.
It really is. We'll give them a couple of more minutes, and then we'll give them the third trivia question. Someone will come up with it, I'm sure. The interesting relation, the real interesting relationship, as odd as it was Miriam and Frederick. Talk about that one for a minute or two.
Okay. So Marion is the daughter of the rich person Bruckner. Okay. She's the half sister of Greta's husband, and she's a social climber, and her mother is especially a social climber. So everything they want to achieve in life is to reach a higher level of society, preferably aristocratic. That would be the best. And they have the money, so they don't have to worry. Friedrich, on the other hand, is a German aristocrat, but impoverished. And so he has the manners that go with the aristocracy, but he doesn't have the money. So when they meet, Marion's mother considers this a match made in heaven. Money and aristocracy, they both can benefit from this. So that's how they end up together. Friedrich, to me, was the most fun to write because I wanted him to sort of be the character that goes along with all these bad things. Doesn't really, he's not the direct perpetrator, but he's willing to close his eyes and accept it. But he also realizes he knows himself, and so he's aware that he's a morally lazy man. Marion, who is just not nice, she does not recognize this about herself. I think that's I think that's a big difference between them. You know, so the one person he really cares about is his son, and that becomes important in the plot, which I don't want to give away. So,
Yeah, Marion was wicked. I tell you, it wasn't. She was wicked.
yeah.
Um, but Susan, any luck with that trivia answer yet?
No luck.
All right. Well,
So
Let me
let's
just
give him
do a
the third.
refresh. Nope, no, 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 no one yet. You want to give him the third?
All right. Yeah, let's give him the third question. So the third question is: in the Habsburg emperors were buried traditionally in three different locations. In the first location, they buried the innards or the gizzards or the intestines. It was in St. Stephen's Cathedral. The second place they were buried was in the Imperial Vault in the Capuchin Church, and that's where they buried the body. The third burial location was in the Church of the Augustinians. And the question is, what was buried in the Church of the Augustinians of the Habsburg emperors? So let's talk about a little section we do called character association, where we take the characters in your book and we try to relate them to historical characters, either in novels or movie version, to who would play this. So let's start with Emma.
My
And
grandmother.
I saw Emma as three possibilities.
Okay.
Ilse Lund, played by Ingrid Bergman, very polished woman, very laid back, had a burning love that never went away. Or Emil Schindler, played by Caroline Goodell in Schindler's List. But the one that stuck out to me throughout the movie was actually Donna Reed. Very beautiful,
But
very.
she has the right.
That's Caroline Goodell.
Emma's
So
dark haired.
that's not dark.
Yeah, that's dark. That's dark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the Donna Reed of personality is what got to me. That, very calm, very aware of what's going on around her, very smart and beautiful lady. Your thoughts? Who would
Well,
you have
as I
play the
said,
character?
I didn't think in terms of casting it, even though I would love this to be a movie or a miniseries or something. But for me, it was so much the people in my family that I associated with these type of people. So to me, my grandmother, whom you have a picture of when she's a bit older, but I could imagine her acting like Emma in that period. I mean, knowing her character. And so that's who I thought of. And she was a beautiful woman and not as dark haired as Emma, but that's sort of who I placed. Friedrich, I imagined like old time actor William Powell or Sam Neill or O'Neill. I think it's Sam Neill.
Sam Neill,
Somebody, yeah, somebody elegant looking, not especially macho. I mean, more dapper than macho. That's sort of how I imagine Friedrich.
I saw Friedrich as Fredo from The Godfather. Very, tries to have the appeal, tries to be slick,
Okay.
But
Yes, that's
in the end,
bad.
he was just creepy and grimy. You
Yes,
know,
that
the
that would
guy,
be. He would work. He would work.
he always rubs you the wrong way, somehow. But um, yeah, but I could see the William Powell because he's very, very dapper, and this guy had to
Right.
sell his part. I mean, as you said earlier, he was once royalty, and now he was destitute, and so he had
Right.
to sell that he still could do it,
That
and he
is
was
so
fooling
right.
everybody else. He thought,
Right.
but, but
And
very
Leone
interesting.
was, I would imagine, more um, fragile looking, and again, I have somebody that I know who was a family friend who was exactly how I imagined her. So it never occurred to me to think of an actor. So I should have brought a picture of her because she would
Yeah,
would have been the right person.
and the last one was Miriam. Who would you see in that role?
Yeah. Well, I think of her as a bleached blonde and slightly, I mean, slightly plump. Okay, so not 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 elegant, but with money. So she knows how to dress because she's got the money to do it, but she's basically not elegant person.
Yeah.
So
I thought of the character Linda Voss from Shining Through, that was played by Melanie Griffith, who was blonde, but I
not
think
in
they
that
had her
picture, but
hair
she was
darker
right.
here, not in that picture.
Yeah,
But
good.
she was pretty. She's a little on the chunky side. She's got full
Yeah.
bodied, and exactly how I pictured her. And I think
Well,
she could pull
I'll
that
put
thought
you
off.
in the movies. So,
I'll be glad I don't do casting. So let's check in and see if we have a winner on either the second or the third, because
We have a winner on the second book, and congratulations to Michelle Tomato. She won the correct answer. Which part of the Habsburgs emperor's
oh,
bodies are buried at the Church of the Augustinians, and it's their hearts. So I guess that's where their favorite place. But we still need an answer of where that phrase "revenge is a dish best served cold" came from.
wow, I thought that's a tough one, but
yeah, it is.
I'm sure they can figure it out.
Okay, we'll
So
give them another couple of minutes.
we'll give them another couple of minutes. So your book is readily available, Amazon, um,
Amazon
and
and ebook in all its formats, not just Kindle, but Nook and Kobo and all those things. And there's an audiobook, which is available also everywhere. Audible is the easiest usually, but it's also on Apple and Google and all those. Chirp. Right now it's
great.
on sale. Chirp starting tomorrow till the end of the
Until
month
in Europe, yeah.
on
So is
Chirp.
it English version or translated to?
No, no, it's English. Now, I would love to have a translator.
Yeah,
Would love to have a translator
that's a
to speak
different
German.
undertaking.
Yeah. That's a
What's
big.
next? What can the viewers expect next out of you?
I'm Well, I did a little book of short stories that's already been published. A couple of them are based on true things. The first one especially is actually based on a true event. Each of them has a bit of a twist at the end, so I think they're fun to read. And I'm just polishing up a novel I've been working at for some years also, which is less serious than this one, not a historical novel. Has an interesting part of it that takes place in Uganda, but basically it's a quiet story,
Good,
not
good,
not war, not not so much suffering. But
good.
that should be out hopefully within I would say 3 months, hopefully.
3 months.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we look forward to getting that one and getting you back on to talk about it. It's been it's All That Lingers is a wonderful book.
Very
And
much.
the characters, the depth that you go through with the characters and the stories in their lives that intertwine. Um, and it hits home with the reality of the things that we face in our lives uh, throughout however long we live, and the things you never stop thinking about. Maybe not every day, but they come up over and over again. And it's also a story about how life runs in cycles, and
And how
you
you can
just
get through.
it is very big cycles, and they keep intersecting as you go along the
Right,
way. You never know who you're going to meet again. So,
right.
but
And I think there
interesting.
is some resilience. There's
And
also,
resilience, yes, we are very resilient.
right.
Well, thank you for coming on. It was wonderful to
Oh,
have you, and
thank you.
enjoyed the
Thank you.
discussion, enjoyed hearing about your family background. You got your Austrian citizenship, and just marvelous stories, and the great pictures. So I really enjoyed it. Well,
Thank you.
welcome.
Excellent. Thank you
Any
so
luck
much,
on the
Irene.
Thank you.
any luck
Now,
on that second question?
Michelle D'Amato is trying. She is. I thank you so much for your trying. But Ralph, do you want to give the answer?
Yeah, Afghan or Afghanistan would be a correct answer.
Yeah. Okay. So
That's a
And so
tough one.
you'll let me know.
yes,
how
I'll send you. I'll send you Michelle's address. We have it in her in our quick file system. She wins a lot of these.
Oh,
Yeah, she's checking us out.
Yes.
And in
Congratulations,
two
Michelle.
weeks, we have a brand new author, Cash Dangerfield, with his hilarious tale called Bastards in Paradise. So it should be a fun discussion.
Excellent. All right. Terrific. Well, listen, thank you so much, Ralph, and thank you, Irene, and thank you, everybody, for watching tonight and for joining in. And, of course, Michelle D'Amato, thank you so much for being such a wonderful player in Ralph's Trivia Questions. That'll do it for tonight's episode of ZTV Live with Reading, Writing, and Ralph. Please tune in tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. We have Dr. Lauren Fisher here at Wellness Wednesday, and her guest is Dr. Lola Capps. Thursday night, Elisa Kovac will be back with Alexandria Makers Market. And on Monday, our own music man, Steve Hauk, with Living on Music. So please join in. That's weeknights at 7. We do have a very special episode of ZTV Live tomorrow afternoon at 5 o'clock p.m. It's a brand new time. We'll be highlighting some of the nonprofits in Alexandria who are participating in this year's Spring to Action 2021. And tomorrow we'll be talking with some of the members in our arts communities about how COVID has really decimated their livelihoods and how crucial it is and how much Spring to Action really helps them. So please tune in tomorrow at 5 o'clock and join that conversation. Until then, thank you so much for watching, and as much as you can, remember to be the good news in someone's life.